I said drop the mop stick and get on your knees, old man!
No, I won't be doing such, not today.
Get down, now!
I'm not going anywhere.
I said move!
You first.
Ah!
Old man, I said get on the floor right now. Don't make me repeat myself. Ben didn't flinch. While bankers hit the floor and customers shrieked, his weathered hands steadied, his breathing slowed, and his eyes, those eyes that had seen Fallujah and Kandahar, locked onto the rifle with lethal recognition. Nobody knew the elderly black janitor mopping their floors was a former Navy SEAL. And in the next 60 minutes, that secret would be the only thing standing between 23 hostages and a tragedy. If you're ready to enjoy this story, I humbly request you like and click subscribe. Also let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now back to the story. The fluorescent lights of First National Bank hummed their usual Tuesday afternoon song. 2:47 p.m. Ben Phillips pushed his industrial mop across the marble floor in steady, methodical strokes. The rhythm was almost meditative, the kind of simple, repetitive motion that kept the mind quiet and the memories buried. The bank was moderately busy for a Tuesday. The lunch rush had passed, leaving behind the usual afternoon stragglers. A young mother at the ATM with a toddler tugging at her hand. Two businessmen at the loan desk discussing interest rates. An elderly couple at a teller window, probably depositing their Social Security check. Normal. Safe. Predictable. Ben had chosen this job specifically for its predictability. Every day the same routine. Clock in at 2 p.m. Mop the lobby. Clean the bathrooms. Empty the trash. Clock out at 6 p.m. Go home to his studio apartment. Microwave dinner. Watch the news. Sleep. Repeat. It was a small life. A quiet life. But it was his. "Oh, Ben," called Jessica from the second teller window, not bothering to look up from her computer screen. "Could you grab the trash from the break room when you get a chance?" "Yes, ma'am," he replied softly. She didn't respond. In 5 years of working at First National, Ben had perfected the art of being invisible. Gray hair cropped close, navy blue coveralls hanging loose, and a quiet demeanor that made people's eyes slide right past him. He was furniture. The man who made their workplace clean, but whom they'd never really see. And that was exactly how he wanted it. The invisibility was intentional. Protective. After 2 decades of being hypervisible, every action scrutinized, every decision carrying life or death weight, fading into the background felt like a relief. Or at least that's what he told himself. Ben's scarred, calloused hands, hands that had once assembled weapons in pitch darkness, moved with practiced efficiency. Every motion was precise, economical, no wasted energy. Old habits died hard. Nobody knew that face had once been painted with camouflage. Nobody knew those hands had pulled brothers from burning vehicles in Ramadi. After 23 years in the Navy, after 12 deployments, after training hundreds of young SEALs, he'd walked away. Not with honor or fanfare, but with a handshake, a plaque he'd thrown in a storage unit, and a silence that felt like drowning. The breaking point had come after his last deployment. He'd watched too many young warriors come home broken, had seen too many of his trainees struggle with PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, substance abuse, had attended too many funerals for men who'd survived war zones only to lose battles with their own minds. And the system that had promised to take care of them, had failed. Over and over and over. He'd tried to help, filed reports, made recommendations, advocated for better mental health support, for transition programs, for follow-up care. And he'd been ignored, told to focus on training, not policy, reminded that his job was to make warriors, not to hold their hands afterward. So he'd left, walked away from the only life he'd ever known, the only family that had ever truly understood him. And he'd chosen anonymity, because being known meant answering questions, meant explaining why he'd left, meant looking into the eyes of people who'd thank him for his service while their government cut benefits and left warriors to die slow deaths in studio apartments. But even as he moved through his routine, part of him, The part that never really shut off was working. Cataloging. Assessing. 3 exits. 12 customers in the lobby. 4 tellers. 2 personal bankers. 1 security guard. Tyrell, good kid, probably never drawn his weapon outside the range. 3 cameras covering the main floor. 2 blind spots near the ATMs. The plate glass windows were reinforced, but not bulletproof. The warrior's mind never truly rests. 2:52 p.m. 5 minutes until his scheduled break. But as Ben pushed his cart past the lone desks, something flickered at the edge of his awareness. A presence. A change in the atmosphere. The front door opened, and the man who stepped through. Everything about him screamed wrong. The way he moved, too rigid, too controlled. The bulge under his jacket. The eyes that swept the room with tactical assessment. The slight tremor in his hands that spoke of adrenaline barely contained. Ben's body went still. His breathing slowed. And in that moment, 5 years of carefully constructed invisibility began to crack. The sound of breaking glass exploded into reality as the man drove his boot through the plate glass door. Everybody down. Get on the floor now. The assault rifle came up in a smooth, practiced motion. Black metal. 30-round magazine. A woman screamed. Jessica dropped behind her counter. The rifle barked once, a single shot into the ceiling. Dust and debris rained down. People hit the floor. All except 2. Tyrell, the security guard, was reaching for his holstered weapon with shaking hands. And Ben was calculating. Distance to the gunman, 23 feet. The man's stance, military, definitely military. Weight distribution slightly forward. Finger on the trigger guard, not the trigger. Trained. Controlled. This wasn't some desperate amateur. This was a soldier. Security. Don't even think about it, the gunman's voice cracked. Hand comes out of that holster, and I will put you down. Son, Ben heard himself say quietly, his voice cutting through the chaos with unexpected authority. Do what he says. Tyrell's eyes shot to him. The janitor, the invisible old man, and something in Ben's tone made the young guard listen. His hand moved slowly away from his weapon. Smart, the gunman said. Now unbuckle that belt. Kick it toward me. The gunman moved like water, checking his angles, maintaining distance, positioning himself where he could see all 3 exits at once. Room clearing. Threat assessment. Perimeter control. Phones. Everyone. Phones on the floor in front of you. Now. The compliance was immediate. 23 people, their devices clattering onto marble. The gunman moved to the door, pulled down the security shade, flipped the sign to closed. Then he backed toward the center of the lobby, rifle sweeping in controlled arcs. Every movement was professional. Calculated. This wasn't panic. This was a plan being executed. Anybody moves, anybody tries to be a hero, people die. Are we clear? Murmured assent from the floor. The gunman pulled out a cell phone with his free hand, never letting the rifle waver. He glanced at the screen, then at the security cameras. Cameras are being monitored. Police will be here in minutes. Everyone stays calm. We all walk out of this. Ben's mind was racing through scenarios, calculating odds, measuring distances. The exits were covered. The gunman had excellent positioning. Even if Ben could close the distance, and he could, he'd done it hundreds of times in training. There were too many variables. Too many hostages in the line of fire. Too much risk. Part of him had already accepted what was going to happen. What he was going to have to do. The warrior instinct was screaming at him to act, to neutralize the threat, to protect the innocent. But the wiser part, the part that had seen what happens when good intentions meet bad tactics, was telling him to wait, to assess, to find the right moment. Because in situations like this, patience saves more lives than bravery. The rest of him was screaming to stay down, stay invisible, let this play out. But then the gunman's eyes found him. Really found him. And for just a moment, beneath the adrenaline and desperation, Ben saw recognition. Not of his face. Of what he was. Warrior recognizing warrior. You, the gunman said, rifle barrel swinging toward Ben. Old man with the mop. On your feet. Ben rose slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. What's your name? Ben. Ben Phillips. Military. The question hung in the air. Ben could lie. Should lie. But something in the other man's eyes made deception impossible. Navy. Long time ago. The gunman's jaw tightened. How long? Retired 5 years back. Bullshit. You move like you're still operational. What were you? Infantry? Special forces? Ben said nothing. Doesn't matter, the gunman continued. Here's what matters. You know what I am. And I know what you are. So we understand each other. He gestured with the rifle. You're going to help me. You're going to keep these people calm. Keep them from doing anything stupid. Because if things go sideways, if people panic, this ends badly. Ben met his eyes. What do you want? Time. Just time. Time for what? That's not your concern. It is if you're planning to hurt these people. The gunman's face twisted. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just need. He stopped himself, breathing hard. I need them to listen. To see. To understand. Ben's assessment shifted. Not a robbery. Not terrorism. Something else. Something personal. Son, Ben said carefully, whatever this is about, there are better ways. Don't. The rifle came up. Don't talk to me like I'm some kid who doesn't know what he's doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. But his hands were shaking now. And his eyes. Ben recognized that look. Had seen it in mirrors after Ramadi. After Kandahar. After the missions that went wrong. This was a man at the end of his rope. Minutes crawled by. The hostages remained frozen on the floor, barely breathing. Jessica was crying silently, her shoulders shaking. An elderly man near the ATM looked pale, possibly in shock. Ben made mental notes of who might need medical attention when this was over. When. Not if. He had to believe in when. Mark paced in tight circles, rifle always moving, always covering potential threats. His training was evident in every movement. He'd never once turned his back to a door, never once let his attention fully focus on one thing. This was a man who'd survived war zones by being smarter, faster, more alert than the enemy. But that same hypervigilance was now his prison. Ben could see it in the way Mark's eyes darted constantly, in the tension that locked his shoulders, in the finger that kept drifting from the trigger guard to the trigger itself. The man was running on pure adrenaline and desperation. And when those ran out, the collapse would be catastrophic. Outside, Ben could hear sirens in the distance, growing louder. The police would be here soon. And when they arrived, the dynamic would change. Escalate. Negotiators would try to talk Mark down, but they wouldn't understand what Ben understood. This wasn't a criminal. This was a brother who'd been pushed past his breaking point. Ben needed to act now, while they were still alone. While there was still a chance to end this without bloodshed. What's your name? Ben asked quietly. Why? Because right now you're just the gunman. I'd rather know who I'm talking to. A long pause. Then, Mark. Mark Sullivan. Navy. A bitter laugh. Yeah. SEAL Team 3. 12 years. 3 deployments. Ben's stomach dropped. Brother. This was a brother. What happened, Mark? What always happens. They used us up and threw us away. His voice was raw. You know how it goes. They train you to be a weapon, point you at the enemy, then wonder why you can't just turn it off when you come home. The hostages were listening now, fear mixing with confusion. Mark continued, his words tumbling out like he'd been holding them in too long. I got cancer. Service-related. The doctors confirmed it. Exposure to burn pits, toxic chemicals. All the shit they told us was safe. Applied for VA benefits. He laughed again, hollow. Denied. Twice. The letters said there wasn't enough evidence of service connection. Wasn't enough evidence. I breathed that poison for 12 years. Ben's jaw tightened. He knew this story. Had heard it too many times. Brothers dying because bureaucrats cared more about saving money than saving lives. I've got maybe 6 months left, Mark said. My daughter's 8 years old. Emma. Smart as hell. Wants to be a scientist. You know what she asked me last week? Ben waited. She asked me why I was selling her toys at the yard sale, why we had to move to a smaller apartment, why Mommy cries at night when she thinks Emma's asleep. Mark's voice broke. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that her father is dying and can't afford to leave her anything but debt? The words hung in the air like smoke. Ben saw several of the hostages wiping their eyes. This wasn't the monster they'd feared. This was someone's father, someone's husband, someone who'd served and been abandoned. I tried everything, Mark continued. Applied for every grant, every assistance program. Lawyers cost money I don't have. The VA appeals process takes years, years I don't have. And meanwhile, I'm watching my daughter's childhood disappear into medical bills and fear. Mark, no, you don't get it. I gave everything, everything, and they won't even help my kid when I'm gone. So yeah, I'm desperate. Yeah, I'm making a statement. Because maybe if I make enough noise, if I force people to pay attention, this isn't the way. Then what is? Mark's voice broke. I tried the right way. Forms and appeals and phone calls and getting transferred to people who don't care. I tried being patient, being respectful, following the rules. He gestured at the cowering hostages with his rifle. You know what these people do? They walk past veterans on the street. They say thank you for your service and feel good about themselves, then vote for politicians who cut our benefits. They wear flag pins and forget we exist. Ben took a careful step forward. Brother, I understand. Do you? Mark's eyes were wet now. Do you really? Or did you get your benefits? Did the system work for you? The question hit like a punch. Because the truth was, Ben had walked away before the system could fail him. Had disappeared into invisibility rather than fight for what he'd earned. And that shame, that cowardice, was part of why he'd been mopping floors instead of living. You're right, Ben said quietly. I don't know your pain. I ran instead of fighting. But Mark, this isn't going to help Emma. At least she'll know I tried. At least she'll know her father didn't just give up and die quietly like they wanted. Outside, the sirens were closer now. Red and blue lights began flickering through the windows. Mark's breathing was getting faster, more erratic. Ben recognized the signs. Panic. The walls closing in. The moment when a desperate man makes a fatal decision. Mark, listen to me, Ben said, his voice taking on the tone he'd used with young SEALs facing their first combat. Steady. Calm. Authoritative. I know what you're feeling right now. The rage. The betrayal. The sense that nobody's listening, nobody cares. Then you know why I had to do this. I know why you think you had to do this. But brother, you're not thinking straight. The cancer, the stress, the desperation, it's clouding your judgment. My judgment is fine. Is it? Because the Mark Sullivan who served 12 years, who earned his trident, who fought for his brothers, that man wouldn't put innocence at risk. That man would find another way. Mark's face crumpled. There is no other way. I've tried everything. Then try one more thing. Ben took another step closer. Let me help you. You can't help me. I'm dying. Maybe. But we can help Emma. We can make sure your story gets heard. We can fight the system together, the right way. The way that actually changes things instead of just making you a headline. They won't listen. They will if we make them. Ben's voice hardened. You want to make noise? Fine. But do it smart. Do it in a way that honors your service instead of destroying it. In a way that makes Emma proud instead of ashamed. Mark's rifle barrel was dropping, inch by inch. I'm so tired, he whispered. I'm so fucking tired of fighting. I know. So let me carry it for a while. Let me be your brother the way we're supposed to be for each other. For a long moment, Mark just stood there, trembling. The rifle was heavy in his hands. Too heavy. Like everything else in his life. Ben could see the exact moment the adrenaline started to crash. The slight sway in Mark's stance. The way his eyes lost focus for just a second. The tremor in his hands getting worse. I didn't want to hurt anyone, Mark whispered. I just wanted them to listen. To see us. To remember we exist. They see you, brother. They hear you. For how long? Tomorrow there'll be another tragedy. Another headline. and we'll be forgotten again. Not if we don't let them forget. Ben's voice was steady, certain. Mark, you just got the attention of every news outlet in the city. Maybe the state. Possibly the nation. That's power. That's a platform. It's also a felony. Maybe. But it's also a story people will remember. And if we're smart, if we use this moment right, we can turn it into something that actually changes things. Not just for you. For all of us. Mark's eyes met Ben's. Searching. Desperate for hope. For a reason to believe this nightmare could mean something. How? He asked. By letting me help you. By trusting that there are still people who give a damn about what happens to veterans. By believing that your service, your sacrifice, your daughter's future, all of it matters. Ben took one more careful step closer. Close enough now that he could reach the rifle if he had to. But he didn't want to. Didn't want this to end with a tackle and handcuffs and Mark losing whatever dignity he had left. You're a SEAL, Ben said quietly. You know about mission planning. About objectives and tactics and adapting when the situation changes. Mark nodded slowly. So look at this as a mission. Your objective is Emma's future. Getting her taken care of. Making sure the system that failed you doesn't fail her. But the current tactic, this standoff, it's not going to accomplish that objective. It's going to put you in prison and make Emma's life harder. Then what's the alternative? A new tactic. We let this situation resolve peacefully. You surrender. I testify about what you said, about the circumstances, about the systemic failures that brought us here. We make noise, the right kind of noise. We get lawyers, advocates, media coverage. We turn your story into a rallying cry for every veteran who's been denied care. They'll still charge me. Probably. But with context, with public support, with the right people fighting for you, maybe it's not life in prison. Maybe it's probation, treatment, a chance to see Emma grow up. Ben's voice dropped lower. And even if the worst happens, even if you do time, at least Emma sees her father fighting for what's right. At least she knows you didn't give up. Didn't just disappear. That when everything went to hell, you still chose to protect people. Still chose to be the warrior you trained to be. A tear rolled down Mark's cheek. Then another. I'm so tired, he whispered. I'm so fucking tired of fighting. I know. So let me carry it for a while. Let me be your brother the way we're supposed to be for each other. The way we should have been all along. For a long moment, Mark just stood there, trembling. Then the rifle sagged completely. I'm sorry, he said. God, I'm sorry. I didn't want to scare anyone. I needed them to see. To understand. They see, Ben said gently. They understand. Now let's make sure they don't forget. Mark nodded slowly. The rifle slipped from his hands, clattering to the floor. He sank to his knees, and Ben was there, catching him, holding him up the way warriors hold each other when the weight gets too heavy. I've got you, brother, Ben murmured. I've got you. The police burst in 30 seconds later, tactical team, weapons drawn, shouting commands. They separated Ben from Mark, cuffed the younger man, checked the hostages. But before they led Mark away, Ben locked eyes with him one more time. I meant what I said. I'm going to help. You're not alone anymore. Mark nodded, tears streaming down his face. Thank you, instructor. That night, Ben sat in a police station giving his statement for the 4th time. The detective across from him, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes, closed her notebook. You did good in there, Mr. Phillips. Talked him down without anyone getting hurt. That's impressive work. Just did what needed doing. Your service record's impressive. 23 years. SEAL Team 5. Multiple combat deployments. Numerous commendations. Why didn't you mention that when you first talked to responding officers? Didn't seem relevant. Didn't seem, she stared at him. You're a decorated veteran working as a janitor. You talked down another veteran in a hostage situation using skills they don't teach in crisis negotiation classes. It's all relevant. Ben said nothing. The detective leaned back in her chair. The DA wants to prosecute Sullivan to the fullest extent. Armed robbery, kidnapping, terroristic threats. He's looking at 20 years minimum. But your testimony could help. If you explain the circumstances, his mental state, the systemic failures that led to this. I'll testify, Ben said. But not just for the trial. What do you mean? Mark Sullivan's story isn't unique. There are thousands of veterans being denied care right now, dying because the system fails them. If I'm going to talk about what happened today, I'm going to talk about all of it. The VA's broken claims process, the benefit denials, the lives being destroyed, the families torn apart, the warriors who come home from war only to fight a different kind of battle, one against bureaucracy, indifference, and a system that treats them like numbers instead of people. The detective studied him with newfound respect. You really think you can change things? The VA's been broken for decades. Politicians talk about reform every election cycle, and nothing happens. Maybe not, but I think I have to try. Because if I don't, if I just go back to being invisible, then what was the point? What did Mark's desperation accomplish? He risked everything to make people see. The least I can do is make sure they keep seeing. Some people would say staying invisible kept you safe, kept you out of all this mess. Ben met her eyes. Some people never served, never had brothers die in their arms, never made promises to take care of each other, no matter what. Mark served honorably for 12 years. He earned the right to health care, to dignity, to a future for his daughter. And the system failed him. He stood. I'm done hiding. I'm done pretending the problems don't exist just because they're not my problems anymore. Mark reminded me who I'm supposed to be. And I'm not wasting that. The detective nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think you're going to make a lot of powerful people very uncomfortable. Good. They should be uncomfortable. They should lose sleep. They should feel 1/10 of the discomfort veterans feel every single day when they're trying to survive in a country that's forgotten them. Over the next days and weeks, Ben became a different kind of warrior. He researched Mark's medical records, documenting every interaction with the VA. He contacted advocacy groups he'd previously ignored. He reached out to journalists who'd covered the hostage situation, offering them a deeper story, not just about one desperate man, but about a systemic crisis affecting hundreds of thousands of veterans. The response was overwhelming. Veterans from across the country reached out with similar stories. Denied claims, inadequate care, bureaucratic nightmares that left them broken and alone. Ben collected every story, documented every failure, built a case that was impossible to ignore. He rented a small office space, started answering calls personally, connected veterans with lawyers, doctors, therapists, helped them navigate the labyrinthine VA appeals process, held their hands through the darkest moments when giving up seemed easier than fighting. Within a month, he had 5 volunteers. Within 2 months, 15. Veterans helping veterans. People who understood the struggle because they'd lived it. The Sullivan Veterans Advocacy Fund became more than just a charity. It became a movement, a rallying point for everyone who'd been told to wait, to be patient, to accept denial after denial while watching their health deteriorate and their families suffer. Ben appeared on local news, then national. He testified before city councils and state legislatures. He became the voice that veterans needed, calm, articulate, impossible to dismiss as just another angry vet. And slowly, the invisible janitor became visible again, not for his own glory, but for those who'd been forgotten. 3 months later, Ben stood in a congressional hearing room, Mark Sullivan's wife beside him. "They said you wanted to see me," Mark said. "I did." Ben pulled up a chair. "I talked to a lawyer friend, pro bono guy who does veteran advocacy. He's willing to take your case." "What case?" "I held a bank hostage. Your disability case. Your daughter's future. Getting you the benefits you earned." Mark's laugh was bitter. "I'm going to prison. Even if I get the benefits, Emma won't see that money. Maybe. Maybe not. But she'll see something more important, her father fighting for what's right, even when it's hard. She'll see warriors standing together, refusing to let the system beat them. Why are you doing this?" Ben met his eyes. "Because for 5 years I hid. I let other veterans fight alone while I pushed a mop, and pretended the problems didn't exist. I told myself I'd earned peace, earned the right to walk away. He paused. But you can't have peace built on the backs of suffering brothers. Real peace comes from standing up, from fighting for each other the way we fought for our country. Mark's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. You didn't drag me anywhere. You reminded me who I am, what I'm supposed to be. A SEAL, a warrior who protects people. Sometimes that's in Kandahar. Sometimes it's in a courtroom fighting the VA. Sometimes it's in a congressional hearing making politicians uncomfortable. You really think you can make them listen? I think we can. Together. Over the next weeks, Ben became a different kind of warrior. He researched Mark's medical records, documented the VA's denials, contacted advocacy groups and sympathetic journalists. The bank hostage situation had made headlines. Now he was going to use that attention to shine a light where it was needed. He reached out to other veterans, found similar stories, built a case not just for Mark, but for systemic reform. And slowly, quietly, the invisible janitor became visible again, not for his own glory, but for those who'd been forgotten. The media coverage was intense. Local news, then national. Veterans organizations took notice. Politicians who'd been ignoring VA reform suddenly wanted to investigate the matter thoroughly. 3 months later, Ben stood in a congressional hearing room, Mark Sullivan's wife beside him. Mark himself was in a medical facility, receiving treatment funded by an emergency grant Ben had fought for. The cancer was still terminal, but at least Mark would die with dignity. The congressman at the head of the table looked tired and angry. Mr. Phillips, you've presented us with documentation of 847 denied VA claims from the last 2 years alone. That's correct, sir. And you're saying this is systemic? I'm saying the system is designed to deny first and approve only under extreme pressure. It's cheaper to make veterans give up than to provide care. The congressman's jaw tightened. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm deeply sorry for what you and your husband endured. Mark's wife spoke clearly. My husband served 12 years. 3 deployments. He came home broken, and the country that broke him abandoned us. If it wasn't for Mr. Phillips and the attention from the bank incident, Mark would have died alone in a county hospital. She paused. How many others have died that way? How many are dying right now while we talk? Silence in the room. Mr. Phillips, the congressman said, you've started a foundation, the Sullivan Veterans Advocacy Fund. Can you tell us about it? It's simple, Ben said. We help veterans navigate the VA system, provide legal support for appeals, connect them with medical care when the government won't, and we make noise when the system fails. And your funding? Donations. After the news coverage, people wanted to help. We've raised over $2 million in 3 months. Every penny goes to veterans. How are you deploying those resources? Direct financial assistance for veterans in crisis. Legal fees for VA appeals. Medical care when the system fails. Mental health services. Housing assistance. Emergency funds for families. We've helped over 400 veterans so far. And the success rate on appeals? 68% of cases we've taken on have been approved or are moving forward with strong evidence. That compares to a national approval rate of around 30%. The difference is simple. We provide professional help, legal representation, medical documentation, the things veterans can't afford on their own. Another congressman spoke up. Mr. Phillips, some have criticized your methods, called you a vigilante, said you're undermining the VA system rather than working within it. Ben's jaw tightened. The VA system is broken. I'm not undermining it. I'm holding it accountable. And if that makes powerful people uncomfortable, good. Veterans have been uncomfortable long enough. But don't you think? No, Ben cut him off. With respect, Congressman, I don't think veterans should have to fight their own government for care they earned. I don't think 12-year bureaucratic appeals processes are acceptable. I don't think it's okay that we lose 22 veterans a day to suicide, many because they can't access the mental health services they desperately need. He paused, letting the words sink in. The Sullivan Veterans Advocacy Fund exists because the system failed. It will continue to exist until the system is fixed. That's not undermining anything. That's survival. The room was silent. The congressman nodded slowly. This committee is drafting legislation to reform VA claim processing. We'd like your input. You'll have it. 2 weeks later, Ben visited Mark in the hospice facility. The room was bright, filled with flowers and cards from veterans around the country. Emma's drawings covered one wall, colorful scenes of families, houses, hope. Stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. Mark was thin, weaker, but his eyes were clear. Instructor. Still making the world safer. Different battlefield, Ben replied, sitting beside the bed. Same mission. Emma wants to meet you. My wife too. Properly, I mean. Not through glass at a detention center. I'd like that very much. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside the window, spring was arriving. Trees budding. Birds singing. Life continuing its relentless march forward. I got approved, Mark said suddenly. What? VA benefits. Full approval. Service-connected disability. They're calling it a fast-track emergency case review. Funny how fast they can move when the press is watching. Ben smiled. That's good. That's really good. Emma's education fund is secure. My wife will have survivor benefits. The foundation helped with all of it. His hand found Ben's. It was frail now, the strength that once carried 60 pounds of gear through desert heat reduced to bird bones and paper skin. I'm glad I didn't shoot anyone that day, Mark said quietly. Glad it ended the way it did. Glad I met you. Me too. Do you think any of this will actually change things? Long term. Ben considered the question. Honestly, I don't know. The system is huge, entrenched, resistant to change. But we've already helped hundreds of veterans, saved lives, prevented suicides, gotten people care they desperately needed. He paused. And we've made noise. We've forced people to pay attention. Congressional hearings, legislation being drafted, media coverage that won't go away. That's not nothing. Mark nodded. I used to think my life was wasted, that all the service, all the sacrifice, didn't matter because I came home broken and nobody cared. And now I know it mattered. My story mattered. Emma will grow up knowing her father fought for something bigger than himself, that he didn't just give up. Tears welled in Ben's eyes. You're a warrior, Mark. Always have been. Always will be. So are you. You just forgot for a while. They sat together as the afternoon light slanted through the windows. Two warriors, two brothers, connected by service and sacrifice and the unbreakable bond of those who faced darkness together. I'm scared, Mark whispered. Of dying. Of being forgotten again. After I'm gone. Ben leaned forward. Mark Sullivan. Navy SEAL. Father. Husband. The man who forced a nation to see its failures. Your name is going to be on the legislation when it passes. Your story is going to be taught in advocacy programs. And Emma is never going to wonder if her father was a hero. Because he was. Is. That's not going to be forgotten. Tears rolled down Mark's gaunt cheeks. Thank you, instructor. Thank you for not giving up. Even when you had every reason to. 6 months after the incident at First National Bank, Ben stood at a podium in a hotel conference room packed with 300 veterans. The first annual Veterans Advocacy Summit. He looked out at the faces, young and old, all branches, all wars. Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force. Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, Korea. People who'd been broken and abandoned and left to fight alone. They weren't alone anymore. The room buzzed with conversation. Veterans sharing stories, exchanging contact information, forming the networks that would sustain them. This was what community looked like. What brotherhood looked like when it extended beyond the battlefield. Ben gripped the podium, feeling the weight of the moment. Mark's photo sat on a table beside him. Dress blues, young and strong, before the wars and the trauma and the tumor. 5 years ago, Ben began, his voice steady but emotional. I walked away from everything I believed in because I thought I couldn't make a difference. I thought the system was too big, too broken, too entrenched to change. He paused, looking across the sea of faces. I was wrong. Applause rippled through the room, building to a roar. Ben waited for it to subside. Change is hard. Change is slow. The VA didn't suddenly become perfect. Veterans are still fighting for benefits. The bureaucracy is still massive and frustrating. But we've made progress. Real, measurable progress. He pulled out a list. In 6 months, we've helped 472 veterans get approved claims. We've prevented 18 documented suicide attempts through our crisis hotline. We've connected 156 veterans with mental health care. We've provided emergency housing assistance to 84 families. We've paid for medical treatments the VA denied 200 times. More applause. Someone shouted, "Hoo-yah!" But numbers don't tell the whole story, Ben continued. Behind every number is a person, a family, a life changed, a future secured. And we did that together. Every donation, every volunteer hour, every person who shared our message, every veteran who found the courage to ask for help. He picked up Mark's photo. This man reminded me what service really means. Not following orders, not completing missions, but standing up for those who can't stand alone. Fighting for justice when the system denies it. Refusing to let brothers and sisters become invisible. His voice strengthened, filled with conviction. Mark Sullivan died 3 weeks ago. Peacefully, with his family around him, with the knowledge that his sacrifice mattered, that his daughter would be taken care of, that his story would save lives. Ben's voice caught, and I made him a promise before he went. I promised him that we would keep fighting, keep advocating, keep making noise until every veteran gets the care and dignity they've earned, until the system serves us instead of failing us, until no warrior has to choose between dignity and desperation. The room was absolutely silent now. 300 people holding their breath. Ben looked across the faces, saw tears, saw determination, saw warriors who'd been beaten down by a system that should have protected them, now standing tall again. The Mark Sullivan Veterans Reform Act is going to pass, he said. The congressman told me yesterday it has bipartisan support. It will streamline VA claims processing, provide emergency funds for terminal cases, create oversight committees, and mandate response time frames. Cheers erupted. People were standing now. But legislation is just the beginning. We need to stay vigilant, hold them accountable, make sure the promises become reality. And we need to keep helping veterans who can't wait for bureaucracy to catch up. He raised his fist. So I'm asking you, all of you, are you with me? Will you keep fighting for your brothers and sisters? Will you refuse to let Mark's sacrifice be in vain? The room erupted. 300 voices roaring as one. 300 fists raised. 300 warriors refusing to be forgotten, refusing to give up, refusing to accept a system that failed them. And Ben Phillips, former SEAL, former janitor, now advocate and fighter on a different kind of battlefield, felt something settle in his chest. Peace. Not the false peace of hiding, but the real peace of purpose fulfilled, of promises kept, of brothers honored. He was no longer invisible, no longer silent. And the warriors he fought for? They would never be forgotten again. 1 year later, Ben stood in the same hotel conference room for the 2nd Annual Veterans Advocacy Summit. The crowd had doubled. 600 veterans, advocates, family members. The energy was electric. The foundation had grown beyond anything he'd imagined. 12 full-time staff, 40 volunteers, partnerships with major law firms providing pro bono services, connections with hospitals offering reduced-cost care, a 24/7 crisis hotline staffed by veterans who understood. They'd helped over 1,200 veterans get approved claims, prevented 47 suicides, housed 200 families facing homelessness, provided scholarships to 86 children of disabled veterans. And Mark's name was on all of it. The Mark Sullivan Veterans Reform Act had passed. New protocols were being implemented. Oversight committees were being formed. Change was happening, slow, imperfect, but real. Emma Sullivan sat in the front row, now 9 years old, holding her mother's hand. Ben had promised to meet with her after the summit, to tell her stories about her father, to make sure she knew what a hero looked like. As Ben stepped to the podium, he thought about the path that had brought him here. From the battlefields of the Middle East to the floors of First National Bank. From invisibility to visibility. From isolation to community. It had taken a desperate veteran with a rifle and a daughter to remind him who he was. What he was meant to do. Serving never stops. The battlefield just changes. The mission continues. And as long as there were warriors who needed help, Ben Phillips would be there. Visible. Vocal. Fighting. Always fighting. But this time, for something that mattered even more than victory. For dignity. For justice. For the simple promise that those who serve will be served in return. That promise was worth every sacrifice. Every battle. Every day for the rest of his life. The end. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, do subscribe to our channel because your support keeps the team going, and stick with us because we have many more where this came from. More intriguing and more amazing stories as you can ever imagine. So do check it out and enjoy.